Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Security at Every Stage, 3 Steps to Take Your Organization from DevOps to DevSecOps. This event is brought to you in partnership with Taos, an IBM company, and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thanks so much for joining us on the webinar today. This is going to be a great panel discussion. We're going to be answering your questions, and I'm confident that you'll be learning a lot about DevSecOps and what it can do for you. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. First off, my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions there in the questions pane. We'll be queuing up the best questions for a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so keep those questions coming. And we want to do our best to answer every one of those. We even have a best question prize to help encourage your questions. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. We also have some special links there in the handouts tab. I want to call your attention to, there is a link to the Taos DevSecOps Readiness Assessment. You'll be learning about this in the webinar. And there's also a link to get started with Taos. At the end of the webinar on this live event, I'll be announcing the winner of our Visa $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize for an additional gift card for a $50 Visa gift card. Of course, you must ask a question to be eligible and also meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. And with that, it's time to kick off today's webinar. I'm excited now to introduce you to today's expert presenters. I'm excited now to be joined by our experts from Taos, Dennis, Craig, and Carissa. It's great to have you on. Dennis, why don't you first start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do there at Taos.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dennis Ruzeski. I'm the manager of the DevOps engineering group at Taos. I've spent the last 10 years or so working as an architect in and with security teams in highly regulated technology companies. And Taos has a 30-year history of providing amazing professional and managed services. We're now proud to be an IBM company.
Awesome, Carissa?
So hi, I'm Carissa. I'm a senior engineer and team lead, currently working with our clients to help automate their workflows across multiple cloud providers. I'm one of the original Taos DevOps engineers with a full stack background. And I also have a broad experience across industries in both technical and sales roles. So that gives me kind of a 360 view of DevOps across departments.
Hey, good morning. My name's Craig Knapik, and I'm the DevSecOps now product manager. The past 7.5 years, my focus has been network security, specifically next generation intrusion prevention systems, and endpoint security, specifically automating the remediation of endpoint infrastructure per the DISA STIGs and CIS benchmarks.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have all of you on. Let's go ahead and just kick it off with, a high level question, a basic definition, and that is just what is DevSecOps? Craig?
Yeah, sure. No, DevSecOps is an acronym, and it stands for Development, Security, and Operations. An important context. In the past, and still all too often today, security is tacked on to software at the end of the software development lifecycle. So with DevSecOps, that changes the paradigm by inserting automated security at every stage of the software development lifecycle or every step in your CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, exactly, Craig, where DevOps is really the principle of speeding the journey of your code from developer to production. DevSecOps is a way to take your security and regulatory requirements and incorporate them into your software deployment pipelines.
Yeah, and I mean, I would add to that basically DevSecOps makes everyone accountable for security with the objective of implementing security decisions and actions at the same speed and scale as development and operations decisions and actions. So to get a good understanding of why DevSecOps, we'll be going over other benefits such as like extra levels of security, responses, environments, and proactiveness.
Excellent. Well, thank you for setting the stage on that and kind of introducing the concept here of DevSecOps. So now let's take this a level deeper here. And maybe you all can explain the difference between just DevOps, DevSecOps, and a SOC. Dennis?
Yeah, so where DevOps is just getting your code out quicker, DevSecOps is a preventive team that incorporates preventive security scans, artifact scanning, and security testing against deployed environments. It's all very proactive, where a SOC, while necessary, is a reactive team that just monitors and responds to security incidents and escalates things as needed.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. That's an important point there. A proactive team. I like that. So let's then just jump into another question here, and that is, I'm sure, a common one from a practitioner's perspective is, why do I need DevSecOps, and really, how is it going to be beneficial to me or my IT organization?
No, sure. That's a good question. DevSecOps yields two benefits: reduced expense and improved security. The cost of developing and operating a secure solution is reduced because it's cheaper to remediate a problem in development than to patch a production vulnerability. Also, the cost of developing and operating a secure solution is reduced when DevSecOps automates many manual security processes. Overall, security is improved because vulnerabilities that are remediated in development reduce the production system's attack surface.
Yeah, no company is too small to be a victim of a targeted attack. There's a very broad threat landscape out there, and it's critical to harden all aspects of your organization, including your deployment pipeline. Almost every company deals with PII or PHI in some way, and in this climate, it's critical to protect your customers' data and yourself against liability and potential litigation. By adopting a DevSecOps culture, you're building security into your foundation rather than adding a layer, instead of adding a layer of icing on your cake, you think of DevSecOps as the flour in the cake. It's fundamental to the construct. Key points are to make sure that you keep your repeatable processes as automated as possible, develop good audit trails, and remove error by removing the human element. It makes for a more secure environment. One of the more memorable recent breaches at a large credit reporting company was human error, possibly even a bad actor scenario. You do not want to be a headline.
That is so true. I agree. In fact, you touched on the DevOps methodology. So as you do adopt that methodology, organically, you're going to reduce your tech debt. But if you already have a DevOps methodology in place, frankly, you're gaining standardization for better efficiency. So with the backing of solid automation, you're allowing your security teams to focus on higher value tasks. Some specific tech debts that I've witnessed are things like lack of authentication on current non-public APIs. The big one, hard-coded roles because they're set to current expectations and there's no thought to future requirements. The big thing that I would touch on is, why do we care? Well, for one, security concerns are often non-functional, so therefore they're likely to not be tracked. And unfortunately, security is often left until the last in a lot of practices. So it's easy to drop it to the lowest level on the to-do list. On a personal level, I've worked with a handful of clients with the mentality that I call the hamster wheel. They say, well, security is important to us, but what we're doing works for us. One of my clients that I had a minimal security team. And honestly, they just hoped that DevOps would cure all of the wounds in the security aspect, which I think leads us to our next topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got to get those clients off of the hamster wheel. I like that analogy. So if we look at it from another perspective, let's talk about what happens if organizations stay with the status quo. Are there risks of not adopting DevSecOps methodologies, Dennis?
Yeah, everyone is definitely exposed to some risk. Data theft is rampant, and failure to meet regulatory or audit requirements can mean penalties or sanctions. Cost-effective risk remediation is the biggest benefit of DevSecOps. Security hygiene is important to minimize your threat vectors, and everything a good DevSecOps team is designed to stay ahead of that threat curve.
Yeah, and just to add on, the risk of continuing with the status quo is really unnecessary expense and enterprise risk. DevSecOps fixes security issues during development, and that's far more cost-effective than retrofitting security into production solutions. DevSecOps reduces a production system's attack surface. Bad actors cannot attack vulnerabilities that were eliminated or remediated during development.
Yeah, that's a great point, Craig. Retooling and rebuilding pipelines is time consuming and costly, but it's way more costly to be in a proactive mode only. Fortunately, most existing pipelining tools have hooks to allow for inserting security scans and other triggers all the way through the pipeline process.
Yeah. So I think this is where our three personal experiences come into play, because we've all seen it. Things work until it doesn't. So everyone's at their own level of what we would call security maturity. So keeping in mind what Dennis and Craig both just went over, it's up to you to realize what your level of security maturity is and how DevSecOps can help.
Yeah, I like this idea here of analyzing, your security maturity. And so if organizations decide to adopt these DevSecOps methodologies that we're talking about, what are some barriers or challenges that they might experience? Dennis?
Yeah, there's a lot of potential barriers. Most of them are cultural and not necessarily technical. Lack of security awareness across an organization and poor perception of what security teams do is a big one. Friction between security and engineering teams is also a big problem, especially when you're dealing with DevOps, where you have dev teams running with no governance in your public clouds, and security teams step in to rein that in. Software teams see that as a big blocker and aggressive tactics by your security team. Additionally, poor integration of existing security tools and gatekeeping practices cause a lot of friction as well. Sometimes tools are put into place to satisfy a checkbox on a requirement list, and notifications just go to a black hole, leaving security to come in at the end of the pipeline and say, no, you can't do this. These things weren't addressed. All of this can be overcome by having an operational team in place that understands how to find and fill the needs of the tech side and balance it against the security requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be that kind of balance that you're talking about. Great point. I mean, so if an organization decides to go from DevOps methodologies to this DevSecOps that we're talking about, what are the steps that they would take to get there?
Yeah, so we actually broke it down into 3 steps. So the first one is addressing the prerequisites. So that includes defining your security requirements and defining the DevOps culture and methodologies, which we've touched on. Also, at this point, it's important to discover and address any potential hurdles. The second step is actually process and analysis. And then the final plan, or the final step, is actually just the plan and the roadmap.
Okay, I like that 3-step process. I mean, so let's talk about these prerequisites. Why are they so important to have those in place?
Sure. So the first step is defining your security requirements. It sets the bar for you. Having a clear understanding of what you have to build towards is critical to be able to understand your tool set and balance out your business needs with your security requirements. So you need a target to shoot for. And the second prereq of having a DevOps culture and methodology is, we've talked about it, the importance of the automation, removing the manual processes. It allows you to establish and police access policies and take away the human involvement and human error.
Yeah, I agree. And to add on to Dennis's point, so there's some essential best practices that you would want to get started. So short, frequent development cycles, organizational priority to install proactive collaboration, incorporation of security from the very beginning. That's the big one. So let's say that you have some, all of these, or none of these in place. You may come across some pain points if you haven't already. Balancing speed and risk, making sure that you don't have continuous deployment chaos or poor visibility of security track records. Lack of coordination between teams and developers can happen. Systems that aren't scalable. The big thing I see is lack of cloud support due to the current security tools not adapting to those constant cloud changes. Regardless of what you may be experiencing, just keep those things in mind as you move forward through the prereq stage.
Yeah, Taos offers a free DevSecOps readiness assessment. This reviews your current security strategy and DevOps maturity. More about this later.
Awesome, Craig. Thank you. That sounds like a great opportunity for so many companies out there. I'm excited to learn more about that. So I'm curious now, once an organization has the prerequisites in place and step one is completed, what do they do for step two, which I think we said was to assess current processes and then do a gap analysis? Is that right, Craig?
Yes. Cross-reference your current security controls and processes to identify gaps relative to your enterprise's target security solution. You'll perform a gap analysis with your current software development tools and processes, review your CI/CD pipeline. You'll ask yourself, which security tools and which security processes can you insert to eliminate these gaps? Which manual security processes can be automated? And which security functions overall can be shifted left?
Yeah, I agree. I think to get the maximum security protection from DevSecOps, it's important to use the recommended best practices, inclusive of people, processes, and technologies. The fragile link of the chain is usually the human factor. So the gap analysis will consider every element of the enterprise to fully identify any weak spots. It'll also efficiently evaluate your current practices to say, okay, let's determine strategies for improvement. The gap analysis really does provide valuable input for formulating that roadmap that we talked about.
Yeah, great point, Carissa. I like that, making sure we look at the human factor. So if we move on to step three, that is to plan and operationalize the roadmap from DevOps to DevSecOps, how would an organization approach that, Dennis?
Sure. So this is where you actually start your building. You need to map your requirements to your processes and tooling. Start working with your software engineering teams to explain what the pipelines are going to look like and what kind of feedback they can get from them. And work with security teams to get the right controls in place and verify that your solution as it goes out is meeting both the business and security requirements.
Yeah. So once you have that plan in place and you start to operationalize, you may come across some roadblocks or features that you want in place and you just don't know where to start. So the next step might be considering who can help and how.
Yeah. Let's our conversation up to this point has been at the 20,000 foot level. So let's drop altitude and look at some more tactical steps. Let's get down to the 5,000, 2,000 foot level. Here you have DevOps, loop, chain, whatever, and basically this is a revisualization of the software development lifecycle or your CI/CD pipeline, et cetera. And so, the important thing to understand is that there are specific security functions or capabilities that can be inserted or injected at every stage of your CI/CD pipeline. We have some specific security capabilities in that can be added to the pre-commit stage. Then also with respect to committing code, continuous integration, also subsequent production or acceptance, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, operations. These are specific security controls and processes that can be, quote, shift left, so that, again, you're taking care of, you're remediating problems before they get into production, you're automating manual security processes. Next slide. Okay. I'm not going to go through, we probably have about 20 different specific technologies or features that we're not going to go through each one, but I do want to highlight, just a handful. So let me start off with static analysis. Basically, you might want to consider integrating application security testing tools into the development pipeline to prevent vulnerable code from reaching production. The benefit is that bad actors targeting the production environment by definition, can exploit non-existent vulnerabilities. In other words, vulnerabilities you eliminated or remediated in development. Another candidate building block would be software composition analysis. Basically, with this, you're going to discover and classify and manage security risk resulting from open source libraries included in your application. The benefit here is that you'll identify all open source and associated license types, or what we call bill of material. You're going to surface open source vulnerabilities, and you'll have the opportunity to manage that security risk.
Yeah, I would actually love to jump in on the SCA piece for just a second. Take, for example, the risk discovery piece. As we know, applications are only as secure as their weakest part. So let's say that you have code that the developer built, or you're using third-party libraries. If you scan only one piece of this puzzle, you won't have the complete risk profile. So security and legal for that application. SCA basically allows you the ability to identify those third-party and open source components that have been integrated. So it lets you know the licenses for each and identifies out-of-date libraries that need to be upgraded or patched.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Yeah.
Let's continue on with candidate building block number 3, image scanning. Here, you automate you have scanners that automate container image scanning, so you can ensure that the code is secure and that the container's configuration is secure. This is going to, again, automate a manual process, and you're going to always, systematically 100% consistently verify that your images and your configuration comply perfectly with your security configuration policy. Next slide. Thank you. And we'll wrap up with the last two. Let's talk about cloud configuration management. This is yet another DevSecOps building block. With cloud configuration management, you're going to define templates to securely provision the infrastructure required to run your applications. There's several benefits to this. First, you'll eliminate the manual effort of provisioning and configuring and securing the infrastructure resources that run those applications. A second benefit is that when defining cloud infrastructure resources, you'll be able to prevent policy violations and the misconfigurations that could be exploited. And then finally, again, by automating this, you now have a repeatable and scalable deployments, both the application and the underlying infrastructure. This reduction in human error leads to improvements in security and quality and responsiveness. And then finally, the fifth feature or capability I'd like to talk about at this time is basic secrets management and key management. When I talk about secrets, basically I'm talking about usernames, passwords, API tokens, SSH keys, encryption keys. And a lot of times today, those secrets are embedded in source code, and ultimately they find they can be found throughout the entire DevOps pipeline. Consequently, they present a significant security risk. With this feature, you can use tools that are going to securely manage and store those secrets to eliminate that risk. So overall benefit is that implementing this best practices for securing your secrets reduces the probability of a serious data breach or intellectual property theft.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's very beneficial, you all breaking down the features and the benefits of DevSecOps to help us understand how this all works. And so I'm curious now, what would be the advantage of an organization to work with a partner if they're going to move from DevOps to DevSecOps? And what should they be looking for in a good partner?
Yeah, sure.
So a good partner, you're definitely going to want to have a team that's got a wide and deep knowledge pool, somebody that understands the evolving threat landscape, a team that stays on top of developments in the security industry. It's important to understand too that once your security requirement is operationalized, because it's constantly changing, it's important to keep these practices in play all the way through, as security is definitely an evolving process. There's no finish line here.
Sure. Taos partners with large and mid-sized enterprises to overcome their largest cloud and DevOps challenges. Taos's DevSecOps Now managed service provides the client access to a team of expertise that spans a wide variety of the DevSecOps tools and capabilities. Over and above, diverse technical expertise, Taos customer experience is second to none. We are very proud of our NPS score of 82 plus and an average client tenure of 9 years.
Very nice. I mean, there's obviously a huge benefit in working with a partner to move to DevSecOps. I mean, we talked about the features and the benefits. What about for small to mid-sized organizations? Are there specific concerns or best practices for a company at that stage, Carissa?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So smaller companies can have a lot of vulnerabilities, and there can be some insecurities talking about that. Also, they may be dealing with risk aversion to automation all the way up at the leadership level. One of the most, I would say, challenging aspects transitioning from DevOps to DevSecOps, especially in the small to mid-size organization, is creating a more open and communicative teams. That's huge. So development teams are often pressed to release capabilities rapidly. So having DevSecOps in place, security becomes an integral part of that development process. As far as best practices, you want to build a case for removing the human error to reduce risk. We touched on human error. You want to institutionalize knowledge and best practices. That's crucial. And you also want to have the right partner that can help do this for you. Also, companies don't know what they don't know. In fact, actually, that reminds me, Dennis and I were literally just talking about something very similar to this the other day. So I'll hand it to you, Dennis.
Oh, yeah. So I was working for a very large media company about 10 years ago, and they had a big thing for content management systems. We had probably 8 of them. Another little snowflake team wanted their own little CMS. So our team took this and built it. And since it was a snowflake, we didn't automate anything. There was no security team at this company per se. So one of the engineers there just built it and ran with it. And about a week later, someone from the network team came over and they were saying, well, why is this little host burning all this network traffic? I thought they were only going to be, publishing 2 to 3 updates a week. And it was just pegging its network pipeline. So we hopped on and took a look at the host, and he had, the engineer who ran with this misconfigured the proxy and had set it up to be an open proxy. So we were proxying traffic for all kinds of bad content on the web. It was a bad thing and a tough lesson learned.
Wow, I love these real world stories. I mean, what about enterprise companies, Dennis?
Yeah, so even when you've got teams in place that own your security pieces, your DAST and your SAS scans and your artifact scanning, you need a knowledgeable SecOps team in place who know how to run them, know how to understand the output from them, and understand the security or the software engineering structure, so they know where to escalate the findings to. So finding the balance between security requirements and operational velocity is really critical, and that's where a good DevSecOps team can be another huge benefit. Security teams in big organizations also need to be checked sometimes. They need to understand and keep in mind that real world requirements and security requirements, sometimes there's a balance you have to meet. You have to balance risk with velocity. It's more than just following the instructions your security team gives you blindly.
Yeah, I can actually think of 2017 and Uber. That's all I have to say. And where I'm going with this. So they faced a security breach, personal details. I think it's 57 million customers. It was just exposed. So the company had to pay to delete the breached information. It happened because no one secured the credentials on the GitHub site that they were using. So then they gained access to the instances that supported Uber and AWS. The archive files containing that information were compromised. So we all know that there are frequently embedded credentials and other secrets that get into code because it's sometimes easy and quick and seems very appealing. And that's why DevSecOps exists.
Wow. I mean, there's a huge risk if this isn't done right. And I mean, we've seen that with the real stories you shared there. I mean, what should folks do if they want to get started with DevSecOps in their organization, Craig?
Sure. No, just as a reminder, Taos offers a DevSecOps readiness assessment. So please, consider leveraging this service to identify the specific DevSecOps capabilities your organization, your enterprise would like to begin with. A DevSecOps readiness assessment is going to examine your security requirements and DevSecOps methodologies. We give you up to 4 hours for our assessment, and during that time, we'll explore, an overview of your existing security strategy. We'll take a look at the DevOps, culture as it is today and the team responsibilities. We'll understand the ownership of tools and key processes, and we'll address the readiness of the DevSecOps team involved.
Yeah, and we're building that DevSecOps team out with senior high-level DevSecOps engineers. All of them are on shore at this point, and all of our internal processes, we drink our own Kool-Aid. We adhere to this as much internally, so that we can, send it up to the clients and say, look, it works. This is how we're able to do it.
Yeah. And adding to this from the engineer's perspective, the whole point is to pay down your security debt with DevSecOps. Going through the motions of the assessment is keeping in mind the end goal, which is building better systems together. Overall, DevSecOps is not a one-person show.
This has really been excellent. I've learned so much about DevSecOps. Thank you, Dennis, Carissa, and Craig. That free DevSecOps readiness assessment sounds like a great opportunity for so many companies out there. It's now time to take questions from the audience. All right, excellent discussion. I'm bringing back in Dennis, Craig, and Carissa now. This is the time where we're answering your questions. We've got a lot of great questions that have come in already, but if you have something on your mind, now's the time to ask. And I'll start with the first question here. I think this one's for you, Dennis. They're asking about what's the future of DevOps? And also, can you talk about AI, ML ops, and data ops?
Oh, yeah. So AI ops, especially as it pertains to DevSecOps, is very cool because it's going to be applying machine learning models to some of your log analysis and software scanning tools, so that the idea of signatures goes away and your machine is going to learn based on trends it's seeing in your traffic and in your source code and in third-party libraries and everything else, how to identify threats easier and faster. It's very cool technology. And as far as data ops goes, it's basically applying DevOps principles to your data and business intelligence pipelines. So you're going to be making your BI more readily available, much more streamlined, have faster availability, and better at reporting at the end of the day.
Excellent. And then let's see, here's another question about containerization. Craig, they're asking, how does a containerization strategy fit into DevSecOps?
Hey, good question, Dave. Containers are key. Just a reminder, Taos DevSecOps Now managed service offers over 20 features, but let's just focus on one specific feature, containerization. Containerization improves security because containers are immutable. Consequently, it is easier to detect attacks against containerized applications. Containerization also improves security because containers make it possible to rapidly redeploy updated applications. This reduces your remediation level of effort. By the way, Taos recently announced an application modernization advisory service that can get you started repackaging your current applications to leverage containers.
Excellent.
So
all right.
Expanding on
Go
that,
ahead.
can I? So you're basically by moving to a containerized environment, it makes it a lot easier to go with a pets versus cattle mentality, and a lot of your patching and OS upgrading requirements go away because you're always rolling out software with a container through your SDLC, and the OS container software application get deployed as one unit through your pipeline, right? So there's no need to patch. You're constantly releasing with your new version of your application, new versions of the container, and it removes a lot of that requirement, and it keeps you in a more naturally hardened state by by eliminating patching and OS upgrades.
Yeah, and I love that pets versus cattle kind of analogy there, so that you never have to patch again. I mean, that's so efficient. Let's see, here's another good question that came in from Jan, who asks, what are the implications of CMMC alignment on DevOps and DevSecOps? Dennis, you want to take that?
Yeah, so CMMC is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It really applies only to DoD branches and companies that work in the defense industrial base areas. But it's basically going to be just like another security framework. It's going to help to set your security requirements that your DevOps teams are going to build to. That's my understanding of it. I don't play too much in the DoD world, but that's, it's just going to be another requirement to meet for your teams to build around.
Hey, Dennis, I'd like to add to that because I do come from the federal space in a previous life, or actually previous lives. So, with CMMC, you have 5 different maturity levels. And so let's talk about probably the level 3 that probably applies to the vast majority of the organizations within the DIB or Defense Industrial Base. For example, one of the controls at level 3 to achieve level 3 maturity CMMC is security awareness training. And, by perfect coincidence or not, security awareness training is one of the specific features we include in our DevSecOps Now, offering. Another key control within, to achieve CMMC level 3 compliance would be basic encryption, hygiene. And so here, going back to specific features that we include in our offering, if you wanted to inject an additional security control to control the use of your secrets in the pre-commit stage of your CI/CD pipeline, we have pre-commit security hooks that are going to scan the new code and verify, identify any secrets that are inadvertently included in that code. Or, as a complement to that, if you go further down the CI/CD pipeline back into the production or continuous deployment, again, referencing to the keys and secrets management that I introduced earlier in this presentation, that would be another security control that you could employ that would help you align and achieve and maintain CMMC compliance.
Great insight. Thank you. I learned a lot on that. That's really, really cool, the CMMC alignment. So another question here, this one's from Steve, who says that they have a legacy ERP system that has been customized to the point where they can no longer upgrade. What's your recommendation to move forward to ensure security compliance for that legacy code? Carissa, you want to take that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So first of all, I want to start off with, in my opinion, it's a myth that organizations with legacy systems can't implement DevSecOps. So understanding that for this instance, the number one step is to upgrade if possible. Now, if you absolutely can't, then you want to make sure that you have good firewalls to isolate as much as possible. You want to capture calls to the app to look for like malicious code injection, SQL injection, or something like buffer overflow type attacks. You also want to monitor your data source to avoid data poisoning. That's a big one. You also want to make sure to work with your audit teams to file an exception, but keep in mind you really can't secure as well as you would be able to with an updated or patched application.
Okay, great advice. Thank you. Let's see, another question, this one from Jen, who asked, how do you deal with team pushback when newly transitioning from DevOps to DevSecOps? I've found humans in general can be resistant to change. Carissa?
100%. And we've all been resistant to change ourselves. So I would say kind of the top 3 challenges that you might get pushback on that I can think of off the top of my head would be like developer knowledge gap, lack of integration tools, also pipeline friction, and the fear of developer overload. And I saw another question that's similar to this down the road, but one of the things with, we're all so slammed in our daily tasks. And so there's that fear of just being overloaded with that shift. Another one I'll throw in too that you might come across is the fear of cultural shift as well. So how do you deal with it is the question. Literally one step at a time. So establish and recognize that there's going to be some defensive mechanisms in place and kind of that general feeling of the job being threatened. So the steps would be execute, accomplish those things one step at a time, and then move on to the next step.
Well said. Yeah, good advice.
Hey, David, I'd just like to add to that.
Go ahead.
One additional point is that, a number of these these security features or capabilities that you're going to inject in your software development lifecycle automate a number of manual steps. So you can hold that, with respect to reducing your manual, level of effort. Typically, that carrot is an initial, good incentive for existing teams to at least consider adding some DevSecOps capabilities or maturity to their software development lifecycle.
Yeah. And one additional point here too is that just like security has to be woven into every part of your technology, it should also be a core part of your culture. It's got to be something that everybody gets behind, and not something that's feared. To reduce the friction, you have to introduce it at every layer of your organization, including in your culture.
Great point. Yeah, that cultural change, the human factor, us being resistant to change, all very important to take into consideration here with DevSecOps. This next question comes from Mark, who asks about if he works with Taos, what are the client's roles and what are Taos's roles? And really, what does Taos do versus not do?
So, all right, so I can answer that. Our Taos can do almost anything you need. We've got a professional services team. We can bring in consultants that have areas of expertise all over the IT realm. My team specifically is a managed services team. We are a task-driven DevOps team. So for roles, if you engage with the DevOps Now service, we will do all kinds of DevOps and operational tasks. We can definitely help you to incorporate DevSecOps into your environment. What we don't do well is we like to phrase it as deal with large T-shirt size projects, right? We like to ingest tasks small. We don't PM really well is because we're just engineers. We don't have a PM branch. So if you've got an existing team, you're already agile, it'll help us to kind of get plugged in with you. But if you don't, we can bring in professional services team to help you establish process and policy around that internally, and we can engage with you that way too.
Excellent. Yeah, it's good to have an understanding of how that relationship works. Here's another question from Allie in the audience who wants to know, if the dev team is swamped with projects, where should a manager start? And then the second part of that, if the manager doesn't want to be overwhelmed or overwhelm the team, but security is definitely a culture that needs to be implemented, what would be the first step to introducing developers to the idea of owning security? Carissa?
Yeah, so I am not a manager. Dennis is my manager, but I would add to it, I'm sure he'll have thoughts. My thought coming from the engineer's perspective, having a manager would be important for communication to be the first step. So understanding that it can be overwhelming, it seems a little threatening at first. There's no need to implement any fear tactics, but sharing that understanding of why it's important, not just for the company, but for you as the developer or engineer. I don't know if you have any extra thoughts on that, Dennis.
I do. So, it's a big task. When you've got any big task in front of you, it's always easier to break it down into smaller goals and milestones. Develop a good sprint cycle, set realistic goals for your sprints, prioritize your tasks appropriately, and just break it off one chunk at a time. Burn down the backlog, and you'll get there.
Yeah, I'd like to say, my thoughts, as a product manager, from my perspective, the two drivers for considering going to DevSecOps are, cost reduction and reduction in risk, security risk. So if you have a number of candidate technologies or features that you want to, consider implementing different projects, you'll want to prioritize based on, based on, which project is going to reduce your risk fastest, cheapest, or which project is going to reduce your level of, manual level of effort, your overall expense cost, again, fastest, cheapest.
Great. Yeah, good advice all around. Let's see, another question here. I like this one about, when it comes to implementing DevSecOps, where should folks really get started? I mean, is the security assessment that we talked about, the DevSecOps readiness assessment, really the best place to start? And if they did go through that, tell us what it's like. What would be the experience? Dennis?
So with the assessment, we'll come in and look at your processes and your existing security requirements, security team, any kind of regulatory requirement you have to meet. Look at the tools you already have in place and see where we can start to align some technology and resources to get you started on the path. The most important thing, though, is to have a clearly defined security requirement. You need to have that so you know what you're building against. It would be like, trying to build the massive Lego set without any directions. You just end up building square blocks, right? So you need the clear requirement, and it really helps to be able to have some good PMing to break it down, because you're going to look at it and you're going to look at it and say, this is massive. How are we ever going to chew this up? And it's just to break it down into smaller bits. So the security assessment, I think we're given 4 hours for the assessment, and it'll basically just be reviewing your process, though. It's looking at what you have in place, looking at what your requirements are, and then starting to align resources to get you on the path.
Yeah, it sounds like such a great opportunity for any company out there. I mean, analyzing what you do and your processes is always valuable. You always find ways to improve it. And then having advice from, veteran experts such as the team from Taos can be such a tremendous benefit, to that process. So this sounds like a great opportunity for a lot of folks out there. The link to this is right there in the handouts tab at the top that says Taos DevSecOps Readiness Assessment. You just click on that and you can learn more about this, sign up for this free assessment, and it's a great opportunity. So make sure that you check that out. Everyone out there in the audience, also check out the link to getting started with Taos there in the handouts tab as well. It looks like we've covered all the questions that have come in. We really appreciate all the excellent questions, and I appreciate all the great wisdom from our presenters today. Dennis, Craig, and Carissa, thank you so much for being on the webinar today.
Yeah, thanks. It was really a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks all to who attended.
Absolutely. And thank you to Taos for supporting the event. And thank you most to our audience. I hope everyone learned a lot on this and hope to see you next time. Have a great day. And don't forget about that DevSecOps Readiness Assessment there in the handouts tab. Bye-bye.